Hi, this is Dave Atkinson again, and thank you for joining me on Life on the Straight. This is the second of the remodel videos that I plan to post, and I think that if you stick with it until I'm finished, and that's going to be many more videos to come, you'll see how it lives up to its name, Epic Remodel. Yesterday when we left off, I had just found out that I had cancer, and it was a sarcoma tumor that was growing in my left thigh. And so that everything ground to a halt because sarcoma is a nasty cancer to get. It's a very rare cancer. It's hard to cure. The treatments are limited because it's so rare. So I immediately went into radiation therapy and immunotherapy. And then that would be followed by surgery, several in a row. And they would find out that they could not salvage my left leg, and they ended up amputating it at the way up at the hip, so I don't have any leg at all. So instead I got some forearm crutches and a wheelchair, and I'm good with that. I have a prosthetic leg that I use mostly to climb a ladder with, if you can believe that, to pick fruit from our trees. But while we were in the hospital, we had some friends and family do a few more things to our house. They put up a LED motion light outside the door of our barn. But mainly what they did was trenched all the way from our barn to the south 2 islands and for water. And before that, the way we would water the shrubs that were down there, we would load up garbage cans full of water in a trailer that we had pulled by our riding lawnmower. And of course, the water sloshes around. By the time you get down to the islands, about half of it was gone. But we'd take 5-gallon buckets and dip it in and water all the shrubs, and that was just a pain. So it was nice to have a water service now going down to 2 field hydrants, one for each island, that we could water with. So what that did, the cancer did by November, and again, this is like November of 2018, the firm that we wanted to build, to do the remodel, that would be Perry Construction, they had to move on to another house. And so that was going to take them probably close to a year to complete that. They're not a big builder. They do one at a time. They're a custom builder. So anyways, while the chemo and the radiation were taking place because the cancer moved from my tumor in my leg, it moved into my lungs, so that created a stage 4 situation with sarcoma. And we were still not really sure if I was going to survive all that. But we had to make a choice if we were going to get on the Perry's schedule, if we were going to commit to having them do it. And so we started those discussions in February. I tentatively says, yes, we're going to do it. And this is while I was on chemo before radiation. And so we were on their schedule. They just had to finish the house that they were working on. So between now, or I should say between that point and when construction would begin, which would be in the fall, we had some preliminary work that needed to be done. And our architect, we had to go back to our architect and have him rejigger the original plans, because the house is not going to be like we had it originally. We weren't going to complete the basement anymore. We needed ADA space between the island and the counters. We needed wider doormats. The thresholds that were going out to the decks and into the sunroom were just hard to navigate in a wheelchair. They were so high. we're going to move the master suite entry into the living room. And so the hallway that serviced the other two smaller bedrooms and the hall bath, that would be walled off from the master suite now, and that would just be almost like its own little wing of the house. And then but doing that allowed us to put in a walk-in closet in the master bathroom, and also allowed us to put in a roll-in style shower with no thresholds at all. So if I needed to take my wheelchair in there, I would be able to do that with no problem. The kitchen dinette that had a slider next to it, that was going to be gone, and we're going to put a pantry in there, big enough for my wheelchair to get in and out of, so a walk-in pantry. And then one of the larger things we're going to do, we're going to reframe the north end of our attached garage. The garage itself was just way bigger than we needed. Like I said, you could put 2 cars, or you could put 4 cars in there. But it had beautiful views to the straight on the north side that were just going to waste because nobody's out in the garage looking out through the one window to see that. So we're going to transform that northern edge of the garage into a laundry room that would also have office space in there for my wife, Amy, and we would also have a mudroom. So anyways, some of the things that the architect put out for us the first time around we were still going to keep, like the additional roof overhang that was going to go over the front deck and give us more protection from that, and it would sit higher up on the roof so it wouldn't block our views of the Olympic Mountains from inside the house. But what I'm going to do now is take a little detour into one of the things about life on the straight. There are days here, most days, where the weather is beautiful. Minimal wind, sunny. If you've ever heard anything about the city of Sequim, Washington, you've heard that there is something called the banana belt. They call it the blue hole. And the Olympic Mountains protect us from the rain coming in. The rain shadow is another term that they use. The Olympic Mountains protect us from a lot of the rain that comes in, and it's just this one area we're in around Sequim. If you move further west towards Port Angeles, that rain shadow disappears. So it's just this one area. So it's a beautiful place to be. But since we live on the straight, there are winds occasionally that come in out of the northwest. They come roaring right down through the channel of water, and they create some gusty wind situations. And being the fact that we sit on the bluff about 120 feet up from the beach, and this bluff is mostly sand, the wind catches that bluff and just generates these little tornadoes that spawn. And they go everywhere, and they can reach several blocks behind us to the south. And what does all that sand do? It settles on the roof. And when the sand settles on your roof and then the rain comes later, all of that sand gets washed into your gutters, and it goes down the drain pipes, and it goes down to where your footing drain is and plugs it up. And I don't think the people that built this house had an understanding of what they were dealing with as far as sand, because they did put in a footing drain all the way around it. It probably didn't take very long for it to completely plug up with sand. So that was a problem for us. Now what we did to kind of mitigate that was we channeled all of the downspouts. We channeled those out into splash blocks, so they would just flow out into the lawn or gardens surrounding the house. But there was one thing that fed into that footing drain. We didn't realize this until a little later, and that was the flush water coming out of our water softener. I don't plan on going into all the details of how a water softener works, but there is a flush cycle that takes place a lot of times daily, sometimes maybe once every day, 2 days or 3 days, depending on your usage of water. But a significant amount of water ends up being discharged, and it has to go somewhere. And the way that this house was designed, it went into the footing drains. We kind of realized something weird was happening. We would, even in the hottest of days, we would go around to the back side of our house, in back of the garage, and the soil around there was just like a marsh. And it's like, how could this happen? How could this be happening? And we looked down one of the pipes sticking out of the ground that leads down to the footing drains, and the water was almost to the very top. And again, this is in the heat of the summer. There was no water at all. We weren't using any. It's like, what's happening with this? So we finally got somebody involved to come out and take a look at that. And he determined that what was going on, he felt that what we could do is to blow out part of that sand on the upper portion of the house. That would be the south-facing part of the house, because that's where the water softener exits the house and enters into the footing drain. And he felt that with these high-pressure jets that he could blow into there, he could clean all that out. And he would also track that pipe all the way out to a dry well. We weren't quite sure where the dry well was, but we knew there was one there. So he had two things to do. He needed to locate the dry well and clean out that pipe as much as possible, giving that flush water a place to go other than gurgle up in the corner of the garage. So unfortunately, he had a little backhoe out there. He was digging down, and he gently, he said, found our power lines that went out to the garage, to the barn, and he yanked it a little bit too much before he realized what was going on. And when we went out into the barn, we noticed that about half of the power would work. Some of the lights would work, some of them wouldn't work. We brought our electrician out, and it's kind of funny how things go when you're doing things around the house, but remodeling. But when they put in the deer fence, and this is in the last sequence you watched, when they put in the deer fence, they drilled the holes and they dropped in the posts, and it must have been right over the top of where the original power line fed out to the barn. It was so close it didn't disrupt anything. But when the guy that was finding our dry well yanked on it, that's all it took. So we had to completely retrench a line from the house out to the barn again. Now, it's not all a bad thing. The original line wasn't buried deep enough. It wasn't buried to code. It also wasn't grounded properly out near the barn. So the new line that went in was deep enough, it was grounded properly. It also brought more power out to the barn. I think the barn had either 50 or 60 amps, and now it would have 100 amps. Plus, we were able to put coax line all the way out to the barn, because we're on cable TV and we use a cable modem for our internet access, and that cable modem is on the north side of our house, so close to where the power comes into the house. So we laid that in there to allow us to bring our cable modem out to the barn area when we were later do our remodel. So moving along, as we approach the date, because we're now looking at the first part of September of 2019, that's when the crew would arrive. And the first thing we had to do is we had to move ourselves into our motorhome. So luckily we had already put in the sewage system, so we didn't have that. We had water there, and we had the 50 amp power that had been put in earlier. So we were all set. We could park the motorhome on the apron in front of our barn, and that would be our home during the entire remodel. We'd be looking right at the house, and we're going to move everything out of the house, just leave the entire house to the contractors to do what they wanted with it. So that was a few days of family and friends and some people that we hired to come help move everything from the house into our barn. That was going to be our staging area. We covered it all up as best as we could with tarps and everything. And then, now that I was on crutches and one leg, it was a little of a challenge to get in and out of the motorhome. Plus, if our cats were going to be out there, we had 2 kittens, and they were going to be out there, and we knew that one of them, Rita, and you're going to see her in a lot of my other things that I post on Life on the Straight, because she's a character. But as soon as that door was going to crack, she is going to come flying out of there. And they're both indoor cats. They never go outside. We have eagles flying around and coyotes, and we just don't want our cats outdoors at all in this environment. So luckily my brother built a nice stairs into a landing that was outside that had a door, a swinging door. So like if we went grocery shopping, we could move everything onto the landing, close the door, open the door to the motorhome. Of course, Rita and maybe Lucy would come out, and then we could move everything in and kind of herd them back into the motorhome and close the door, and everything would be good. So that was one thing we had to do, is move out into the motorhome. And then on September 3rd, the first work began. And they started on the roof overhang section that was going to come over the front deck. So the first thing they were going to have to do is demolish the existing smaller overhang. So on day 1, they got all the wrapping off of the beams and the posts, and they removed the fascia from underneath the small overhang. And they put a few things up on the roof to help them going forward with that. And we used that opportunity, since the house was all vacant, to do one last walkthrough, just to see all the rooms and everything as they were, with nothing in them. Actually, there was one piece of furniture that was still left. That was Amy's armoire, and the thing weighed 1,000,000 pounds. And we were just waiting to get enough manpower to get that thing out of the house. But everything else was gone from the house, so all these photos show that. So that's where I'm going to leave this segment, is right when work is starting. And we will see you on the next installment. Thanks again for watching.